Welcome and good morning, everyone. It is June 13th, and welcome to the board meeting of the Connecticut Paid Leave Board of Directors. It is 9:02, and Amber, I will ask you to please take attendance.
Thank you, Fran. I do not see Ava has joined us yet, but I will circle back in a moment. Isha Canada.
Present.
Adrian Cochran. I don't believe Adrian has joined us yet. I'll circle back. Andrea Comer, also I don't think has joined us yet. We'll circle back. Sheila Hummel.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning, Sheila. Ellen McKitterick.
Present.
Hello, Ellen. Fran Pastori.
Present.
Alice Pritchard.
Present.
David Salazar.
Present.
John Scott.
I'm here.
Mike Soltis will not be joining us today. Molly Weston Williamson.
Present.
Holly will not be joining us today. Janae Woods Weber.
Present.
Good morning, Janae. And Justin Zartman.
Present.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to circle back. Has Adrian Cochran joined us yet? Not yet. Okay. Andrea Comer.
Nope.
See either.
Okay. And Ava Bermuda Zimmerman.
Nope.
Okay. Thank you. We do have a quorum.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much, Amber. First, I'd like to thank members of the public for joining us this morning, and I believe we have a number of members of the legislative team joining us, so thank you all so much for being here. First order of business is to review the May 9th, 2024 meeting minutes. Any corrections or any opportunities for discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
John, thank you. May I have a second?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstaining for Isha as well.
Molly and
Thank
Isha.
you.
Okay.
Thank you, Molly and Isha. Okay, the motion carries. Thanks, everyone. Good morning, Harinda. Would like to ask you to please provide the actuary quarterly update.
Arindra, is your sharing working?
I know Viva's here. I don't see her, Indra.
I actually don't.
I don't see him either,
Arindra
actually.
either.
Viva, are you able to do the presentation?
Yeah, he was supposed to join. Let me check. Yeah.
Should we move on and anticipate that they might come a little bit later?
That's a good idea.
Okay, so let's move on to Erin. Would you lead us in a discussion regarding the posting of the contribution rate policy in the Law Journal for public comment?
Let me grab the slide. So if you have attended, let's clear some of this stuff here. If you have attended any of the Finance Committee meetings since March or the Policy and Personnel Committee meetings since I think April, some of this is going to be familiar to you, but not everybody has been part of those meetings, so I'll just start from the beginning. We have been working quite diligently for several months now to identify what factors we believe should be included in any rate calculation considerations. And this slide really summarizes those discussions, recognizing that we have a statutory cap of 0.5%, which is the lowest rate cap of all the other states. That is a factor on our flexibility because it limits how we can recover if we ever reduce rates too much. We also want to take into consideration both the current and future fund balance, which includes not simply making sure that there's enough money, but paying attention to the timing. For example, we don't receive most of the money on the quarter. We receive it at the end of the month grace period, and we do have to hold on to a reserve for outstanding claims. We've also been talking really for the last year about making sure that we have enough money in the reserves to not only pay for sort of anticipated expenses, but also to have enough money for other issues as well. So we've been really looking at a 10-year horizon so that we have that ability to mitigate any changes. If you are walking down the street and you're looking just at your toes, you're going to fall off the curb. Whereas if you are walking and keep your head up high, you can kind of see what's coming in front of you. And we want to do that ourselves. We also know that our incident rates are rising, which is what we want to happen. It's what we desire to happen. And it's what we expect to happen given that we have such a new program. And we have been seeing incident rates increasing month over month. So we want to make sure we're planning for that. And then, of course, we want to make sure we're planning for sort of extraordinary expenses, shock events, another downturn, another pandemic, anything like that. And so we have to be very conservative because we do not have any other sources of income. Nobody is waiting in the wings to, be an angel investor with us. So we have to really be careful. And our statutory obligation is to minimize volatility. So taking all of that into consideration, we've been working with our actuaries to kind of put it into math. And Dave, ask you to explain this. Do you want this page or the next one?
Let's skip ahead to the next one. I'll
There we go.
incorporate it. There we go. Thank you. Yeah. I love the math, so we're going to go right to the math. So based on the components that Erin had just discussed, we took those components and, as Erin mentioned, in conjunction with Spring, turned them into a formula that we can use on a go-forward basis. And so, big picture, the formula looks at where we expect to be in the 10-year horizon, looking at a long-term trend. Like Erin said, we want to look straight ahead, not at our toes, because long-term trends allows us to look at a big picture that may be masked by too short of a time frame. And so if you look at the screen, you'll see capital letter A and capital letter B. And A is where we are now, or at least where we expect to be in a few weeks at the end of June. And then letter B says, where do we think, what is the activity going to be in 10 years? And so if you add those two together, you get letter C, which is where we project to be 10 years from now. And that's roughly $1.1 billion, because we're starting at about 600 million, 6 and change. There's another 4 and change. And when you add it all together, you'll round up to about $1.1 billion. And so the next part of that is letter D, our target fund balance. What do we need for a contingency in 10 years? And these are the shock events that Erin was referencing before. So if there was a shock event to contributions, whereas 10% of the contributions, let me rephrase that, contributions would be reduced by 10% for 3 years. And at the same time, benefits would increase at 25% for 3 years. What would we need for that to weather the storm so we could still pay at full benefits? And so that number comes out to about $700 million. So if you do the math, what do we have at the end of that? What's the difference? And the difference is about $375 million of a projected surplus. And that's letter E. So the next part of the formula is, okay, so we have a surplus. How does that affect the contribution rate? Because that's really what we're getting to, is determining what the contribution rate is. And so we say, okay, well, what is that 375 million as a percentage of the contributions for the next 10 years? And that's the second number from the top, the $5.6 billion. And that's 7%. So that says, okay, then we would have, then what we would have the ability to reduce the contribution rate by 7% and still be okay to weather the storm and be okay with the shock events. So our current rate, as I think the board is aware, is 0.5%. So if we reduce that by 7%, or stated another way, took 93% of it, what would that rate be? And it would be 0.467. But we want to round that up, and we want to use increments of 25, 0.5, 0.475, 0.45. We want to minimize, and why is that? We want to minimize the volatility of the rates because we want to limit the need for rate changes because that's actually written as part of our statute. So we would round that up to 0.475. And so it reduces the rate in a temper and modulated way. And there's actually a federal precedent for that because federal rates are done at the 25 increment points as well. So like I mentioned, there is a predecessor for that. So putting that all into account, we would be able to reduce the rate for the upcoming calendar year to 475. We would do this exercise no less than annually because there may be new assumptions coming in based on activity for another year. And then we will review the numbers again and see how the math works out and see if the rate needs adjusting annually going forward.
All right, thank you, Dave. So this is really all in the way of background because we have decision opportunity for the board. The board's statutory obligation is to set the calculation rate. We've been doing all this work to try to give you factors to consider and a process to consider when setting the calculation rate or contribution rate. But the decision point right now is, how do we memorialize that going forward? There are three choices. One, status quo. The statute gives you the discretion. We can just leave that discretion sort of unfettered, keep all of this in the background. Two, develop a mathematical formula that looks like the spreadsheet that Dave just reviewed, and have that mathematical formula be our policy. That is not typically the way policies are written. I will say that. It's not really what is necessarily the best approach because one, it's really difficult to put that into a simple formula and have it be meaningful. Two, this is still very new. We might want to make tweaks about, is it 3 times 10% or is it 3 times 11%, whatever we want to do. And for when you look at rate setting policies in other agencies, you really don't see a whole lot of mathematical equations. You see words. And so the third option would be to have a policy that includes words. And so I want to share, nope. There it is. Okay. I want to share my screen again and show you the draft policy. This was sent around. This would be a recommendation for how to actually turn the math into an actionable policy that the board could utilize moving forward on an annual basis. I'm going to make this a little bigger. Try and show my screen a little bit better.
Thank you.
So this is our proposal as a draft policy for the board to consider in terms of when they establish the contribution rate. As Dave said, you'd want to do that every year. You want to do this analysis, and preferably no later than June of each year. But we want to give ourselves a little bit of discretion in case we don't have a quorum in June and we have to push it to July. So this is what we would like the board to consider, and we would ask the board to give us the approval to post this for public comment because this would become a formal policy. So I will say that the wording has been reviewed by policy and personnel, they have made a few changes. So this is sort of the result of policy and personnel's recommendations for what the language should be. And with that, I'll open it up for questions. Molly, I see that you've raised your hand. Can I stop sharing so I can see people, or would you all like me to keep the policy up?
I think it's fine either way, whatever anybody.
Okay. Well, back up if anyone wants it.
Thank you, and thank you for all of that really helpful background and context. I think this approach under the statutory constraints we have makes a lot of sense. I think it builds in an annual review, which is smart and good practice, and the thing that we definitely should be doing, but also keeps things in the discretionary realm. I will say, as a matter of practice, if we did not have such a low statutory cap, I think a more formulaic approach would be preferable, but we do have that cap. Like, I think the reality is, with the 0.5 cap, we have to be hyper conservative, including conservative in not lowering the rates, because we have so little ability to fix things down the road. Like, we can't decide that next year the rate will be 0.51, even if that's what we need to get the fund back in balance. And so I think under those circumstances, preserving discretion is really smart and appropriate. And I think if the legislature wishes to revisit that and to allow us to have that more flexibility, that would be a great thing for the legislature to do, but that's not within the authority's power. The other thing I would say, just for our broader consideration, which is not really about this policy, which I think we absolutely should post and I think is the right approach, is that if our actuarial analysis is continuing to tell us that 0.5 gives us this, additional reserves beyond what we need, again, a thing for the legislature to consider is our benefits are lower than we would like them to be. The effective wage replacement rate for most workers is lower than we would like to be. It's lower than most peer states, except for the very lowest income workers, because of where our inflection point is. And if it's the case that at a 0.5 rate or something a lot like a 0.5 rate, we could afford to provide more generous benefits to Connecticut workers, that's what we ought to be doing. But again, that's a thing that the legislature has the power to do. We don't have the power to do. We can only lower. We can't raise. And so I think at this juncture, if that's what the actuarial analysis is telling us, is that there may be some room to add some of that generosity, along with, we know that we're continuing to work to raise take-up rates, to raise the number of workers who are filing. We know there's a lot of Connecticut workers who could benefit from the program who aren't filing yet. And again, not for lack of trying by the authority. So I think I want to just have that context about sort of what the numbers are telling us. But under the statutory constraints we have, I think an annual discretionary review process that takes into account these kind of factors, it's not in the policy and I don't think it needs to be, but my assumption is that assuming we adopt this policy, that when next year we look at these numbers, we will have recommendations from people who've done the math and for people who've done actuarial analysis, and we'll have all of that information to consider and decide whether to act upon. Like, I think that is the best and most responsible option under the statutory constraints we're under. I think it's the best way for us to be responsible stewards, particularly, I think, just from a good governance perspective. We will do it annually on a fixed timeline that gives people lots of notice, that allows folks who wish to weigh in to have time to do so, I think is the best way to do what we're possible doing. And again, if and when the legislature decides to adjust the parameters, we can respond to that. But I think under the parameters we're under, this is the best approach we've got.
Thank you, Molly. That was so thorough and so well said, and makes so much sense. And I will reiterate some of what my thinking is around that, which is I love that this is a very deliberate and thoughtful approach. And at some point, to your earlier point, Molly, about, we're much lower than most of our peer states, I would love to share that information, not necessarily at this board meeting, but I think at the next board meeting, Erin, we should share that grid that your team provided, which really illustrates where we fall within our benefit rate. So I agree, and thanks, Molly. That was really very thorough and thoughtful. Anybody else have anything they want to add to that? Okay, if I don't hear anything, then we can move forward and ask for a motion to authorize the authority to post a draft contribution rate policy in the Connecticut Law Journal for public comment.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Molly. May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thanks, everyone. The motion carries. And I wanted just to add that I think this is a really democratic approach, and I'm really proud of us for making this happen. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Job well done, team. Michael, would you lead us in the discussion around the travel and business related expense policy?
Actually, could I make a request that we go back?
Oh, yes, Herinda.
Yeah,
Herinda's here. Okay.
Sorry, Michael.
Sorry about that. Yep, I did know
We're just going to hold you in
see that.
suspense for a little while longer.
All right, Herinda, you're up. Thank you. Please provide the actuary quarterly update. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on. I'll share my screen now so you can see this presentation. Should be able to see it now.
We can see your screen, Herinda.
Great. Okay, thank you. So the purpose of this part of the presentation is to talk about experience for the first 3 quarters of the year, fiscal year, July through March. I'll start with the key results as I usually do. Overall, the ending fund balance net of outstanding reserves, so outstanding contributions and payments, was $621.8 million. That's slightly higher, about 0.4% higher than what we had projected in February of this year. So we had 619 million. Now we're at 621.8 million. Okay, that's driven overall. The change is driven by a couple of things. So one, higher contributions collected. So and also higher investment income, offset in part by slightly higher claims incurred claims experience. So overall, it's a relatively small change, but the pieces, you have about a 1% increase in higher contributions relative to what was projected previously overall, and about the same, about 1% higher in terms of the claims experience as well. Okay. The resulting fund position continues to remain strong, just kind of support the prior discussion around rates as well. We continue to meet all our targets that have been established here. All right, I'll keep going. This page provides a graphical illustration of the same items that I discussed. On the left-hand side, you'll see the actual results, and on the right-hand side, you see the prior projection. So overall, you see the starting fund balance at 557 million. Total revenue, contributions and investment income, 367.4 million. And then total expenses, the claims payments and all of the other expenses, 302.8 million. So total net result of 621.8. Okay. This page tend not to go into the detail unless there are any questions, but this page provides all of the detail that support the prior 2 pages. Okay. Now what we also provide every quarter is an update to the annual results. So the prior results that I provided for the first 3 quarters. This is an update for the full 4 quarters of the full year. So this the updated projection is so it provides for an ending fund balance of 633.5 million, slightly higher than the prior number, so about 0.1% higher than the prior number of 632.6 million. Okay, so overall, that means that we're going to have net activity projected of about 76 million compared to the 75 that was projected before. And this is reflecting higher contributions earned, as well as higher claims experience, as well as a few other adjustments. So higher investment income, again, reflective of the experience that we had for the first 3 quarters, and slightly lower expenses. So overall, 633.5 is what we projected for the fiscal year end results. Okay, so not a lot of change this quarter, but this kind of these are the results that I wanted to present. Yeah. Enough for any questions.
I don't see any questions. So, Fran, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thanks, Harinda.
Sure.
No questions from the group? Okay. Then we can move right along, I think. Correct?
Yep.
All right, thank you. So we're moving on to back to Michael. Number 5 on the agenda. Michael, would you lead us in the discussion regarding the travel and business-related expense policy? Thank you. Thank you, Harinda.
Good morning, everyone. This may be a quick agenda item. We've gone into details regarding this policy in previous board meetings, primarily in the February and April ones. So I'm going to fast forward a bit on the topic just to avoid repeating conversations the board has already had. In 30 seconds or less, basically, the authority folks had recommended changes to the business travel and related expense policy. It was just a general refresh now that we're in more of a steady state for the program. We had posted the updated policy for public notice and comment back in February, and we were ready to move forward with the official adoption. We just did not have sufficient board members present in previous meetings in order to adopt it, because we do require 2/3 of the voting members in order to adopt official policies or procedures. I'm happy to go into more details about the specifics of the policy and the changes if anyone would like me to do so. However, if not, and the board would prefer to sort of move right to the motion and the vote, I would be okay with that as well.
Okay, so the question is, does anybody have any additional information that they would like from Michael before we go into a vote? Okay, sounds good. Everyone's in a very congenial state this morning. No questions.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you, Michael. So may I have a motion to adopt the business and travel related expense?
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Al.
Second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, great. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Erin, you're up next for the discussion regarding the COLA increases for the non-union members of the staff.
Thank you so much. And thank you, board members. You've made Michael's day by getting this policy adopted. So in April, the legislature approved the wage reopener agreement that had been reached between the administration and the CBAC coalition. That wage reopener provided for a 2.5% COLA for folks who are represented by collective bargaining agreements. That COLA would take effect on July 1st. On May 3rd, Department of Administrative Services and the Office of Policy Management issued an E-item, which is state speak for a matter that relates to economics. It has to be jointly approved by DIS and OPM. That E-item extended the 2.5% COLA to non-represented employees, but the E-item does not apply automatically to us because our statutes give the board the authority to set salaries for the staff. For consistency's sake, for parity, in recognition of our need to recruit and retrain our amazingly high qualified and wonderful staff, we do ask that the board approve that 2.5% COLA for our staff as well. We do have some members of our staff who are represented by collective bargaining, primarily in our IT and finance, as well as clerical, but 2/3 of us are not represented by collective bargaining. And so in order for that group of us, we would ask that the 2.5% COLA be approved for all non-represented staff. to make life easier and frankly to simplify payroll, it would be handy if you all would include me in that approval. I will say that the funds are already included in the fiscal year 25 budget that has been previously adopted because we anticipated making this request knowing that the COLA was in the works for the represented folks. So other than just pointing out that this is something that has been approved in years past, I'm happy to take any questions. Everyone's very quiet today. You're right, Fran.
I'd be very happy to make the motion and to include Erin in the increases as well.
Alice, thank you so much for doing that. You
I'll be
saved
very
me
happy
the
to make
question.
second.
All right, John. So we have a motion to approve and we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, everyone, thank you so much. The motion carries. Moving right along to item 7, to the committee reports. Michael's not with us today, but is there anybody who wants to provide a report on policy and personnel?
I'm the next closest as another Michael. I guess I can.
Okay, there you go. Thank you.
The committee met on June 4th and discussed a few topics. One was the contribution rate policy that the board had just discussed earlier this morning, including making some edits to the specific language in the policy. The committee also discussed current options available to authority employees should they wish to report any ethical or other concerns they may have. Those options include both reporting to folks inside the Connecticut paid leave team as well as outside, based on their comfort level or the issue they're encountering. And the committee also discussed whether there should be additional options established for them. And then finally, the last topic was the committee received a preview of the expected policy work that will be occurring for the second half of 2024. And that is about it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Anybody have any questions for Michael? Okay. Molly, outreach and engagement. Is there anything you'd like to share?
We met on the 16th and got great updates on the work the team has been doing, as well as the legislative update.
Thank you. Anybody have anything they'd like to ask Molly? Okay. Dave, back to you. Would you please provide the Finance and Audit Committee report?
Okay, well, very easy. We didn't have a Finance and Audit Committee meeting at the end of last month, so we didn't discuss anything. But we did distribute out the financial statements to the committee, as well as the actuarial report that Harindra just went over a few minutes ago. So I'm going to briefly go over the financial statements that were distributed at that time.
We can see your screen, Dave.
Okay, thank you for the confirmation. So these are the results through the month of April 2024. And so the net activity for the month was almost $4 million, creating a positive $265,000 variance. We did get let's try that again. The revenue that came in was the $5 million administrative fee for the quarter. And we did have a positive variance of fund recovery penalties as our fund recovery efforts continue to do well. The positive variance from expenses continues to happen. Year to date, our results for expenses are almost $3.1 million of an expense variance. And the leading expenses continue to be the typical categories: payroll and related benefits, contact center, software licenses, other software expenses. So we continue to be on track to be ahead of the budget. Again, the negative $1.3 million, that's just because we didn't transfer the $5 million earlier in the fiscal year because we had enough money in operating reserves. As far as bond activity, there wasn't any for the month of April, so everything pretty much stayed the same. What does that mean? That means we still have about $2.4 million of bond money that's authorized for us to use in the future. Contribution activity for the month April is one of the months of the year when most of the contributions come in. So we got over $136.9 million in contributions for the month. That was almost a $24 million positive variance against what we budgeted. And that was the main driver in the positive variance for the month of over $29.7 million. The other part of that was the benefit expense. Our benefit expense for the month of April was $30.2 million, which averages to about $7.6 million a week. So we are seeing the benefits paid increase slowly but surely over time. Year to date, our variance is over $57.6 million, and that's due to positive variances across the board in terms of revenue and expenses. As I mentioned, we did get most of our contributions for the first quarter in April. So I just wanted to share this graph, which shows our contributions by quarter since the inception of the authority. The yellow column towards the left are the contributions for the latest quarter, and that came in at over $138 million. As you can see, contributions by quarter increase by quarter and are increasing by year. The $138.3 million is about 4.6% ahead of we were last year. And so the increases by quarter year over year are typically these days between 4 and 5%. So we are seeing that trend continue. Contribution fund as of the end of April was over $635.2 million. Just a preview of May. May's expenses for the month were almost, just under $1.5 million. That's a little higher than usual. That's because we had 3 pay periods in May. That happens 2 or 3 times a year, and May was the month this time, so that bumped the expenses up. But everything else was typical for the authority in terms of types of expenses and the expense trend. Contributions paid for the month of May, there was an extra week paid in there, again, because that's how the calendar works. So we paid $37.8 million for the month. And again, for the second month in a row, that averages out to about $7.6 million a week in benefits. So that seems to be the new average for now. Contributions for May were over $1 million, and our investment income was $2.8 million. We're still earning at about 5.4% for that. And as far as where we think we'll be at the end of the year, which fiscal year, which is only a couple of weeks away, we do think in terms of expenses, we'll be almost $3.6 million ahead of budget. Again, total, it'll be 622 negative. But again, that's just because we didn't transfer the $5 million earlier, which you can see as part of our contribution budget in this row right here. And as far as that goes, we expect to be about $62.6 million ahead of budget. Our net activity will be about $75.5 million. These projections were calculated in tandem with the information that we got from spring, again, that Harindra went over earlier, and we continue to be looking on track to be pretty close to these numbers by the end of the fiscal year. So that's where we are so far. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Michael, for your report. And we're going to continue to move right along if everyone is going to be in the no question mode. So must be very close to the weekend. All right, Erin. Yeah. Erin, would you kindly provide us with the CEO report? Michael, thank you very much for being so thorough. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fran. So just a couple of additional points of information for you. I was about to say interest, but I think it's interesting. I won't assume for you. one thing is we did make our payment to OPM for our annual bond repayment obligation. Dave jumped over that in the May expenses, but that's an important thing that we are on top of and continuing to repay that obligation. So just wanted to make a note of that. And as you all know, we expanded and re-platformed our website last fall. Part of the work that our amazing IT team does is make sure that that is maintained as a secure environment. One of the things we do for that is to have a vulnerability test, sort of get the white hats in and try and break our system. The executive summary starts with current assessment of the Connecticut Paid Leave web application shows it to be a well-architected application. So while they have a couple of suggestions for us, because what we pay for, I think it's really important to show that it is a good, strong application, and I'm just very proud of the work that our team has done to create it and to maintain it and to make sure that everything is as secure as possible, and always looking to increase that. On a related note, we have both our external auditors beginning their annual review, as well as the auditors of public accounts. Again, it gives us the opportunity to have entities looking at our operations, checking to see if there are any soft spots, and giving us opportunities for improvement. We anticipate that it'll take a few months for both of those audits to be completed, so we probably will have the results for you, I would imagine, in early fall. But it's something that we think gives us the opportunity to improve, and so we actually look forward, which may sound odd, but we look forward to them. I wanted to share another thing that we're looking forward to is an event that John, Jessica, and I will be going to in Washington, D.C. at the end of the month. It is an event hosted by CLASP, which is the committee, Molly? Is it Committee on Law and Social Progress? Commission? Center on Law and Social Progress. Center. It's pulling together all of the paid leave states, as well as advocates and other sort of interested parties, so that we have the opportunity to not only compare what we're doing, but also talk about how we can improve, how other states can join the fun. We are being promised an opportunity to talk to some folks on the federal delegation, so we're really looking forward to that event. So that's something the three of us will be going to at the end of the month. We'll be reporting back as we go. And then finally, our community education coordinator initiative is proceeding apace. The request for proposals was issued last month. The responses are due next week, so we're really hoping that we'll get a good response. We've done a great deal of outreach on that, so hopefully that will be moving apace. And then truly, finally, I wanted to mention that we're doing a great deal of outreach work to let folks know about the changes that will be coming down the line with the Public Act 24-5, otherwise known as Senate Bill 222, which is our legislation that was passed this year. One of the big changes was the narrowing of the definition of municipality to make it easier for entities to determine, are they considered municipalities for purposes of paid leave? In Connecticut FMLA, it's really about their ability to tax. And so we're doing outreach to that. So we've got a busy summer planned. We've got a busy fall planned, as always. And we're working to make sure that we keep doing a good job. So with that, I'll take any questions. Not seeing any questions. Guess we can move on.
All right, thank you so much, Erin. And Dave, my apologies. I think I called you Michael before, so thank you so much for understanding and not calling me out. Erin, thank you so much. Do we have any old business? Okay, any new business? I think this is a first. It's 9:47, and I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, may I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? And the motion carries. Enjoy this weather. We're going to be having a heat wave, so stay cool and everybody enjoy the weekend. Thank you so much.
All right.
Great
Thanks,
job
everybody.
today,
Bye, everybody.
Thank-
Have a good weekend.
Everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye. Good work.